He was born into a world on the brink of great upheaval, yet his own life began with a secret. In December of 1503, in the small, sun-drenched town of Salon-de-Provence in southern France, the firstborn son, Michel, was born to the family of the notary Michel de Nostredame. Officially, they were devout Catholics, loyal subjects of King Louis XII. But another story lived on behind the closed shutters of their home. Michel's ancestors were Sephardic Jews, physicians and scholars who had fled persecution. His paternal grandfather, Guy Gassonet, had been baptized only half a century before his grandson's birth, adopting the surname de Nostredame, meaning Our Lady, to survive in an intolerant Christian world. This dual heritage would define the boy's destiny. How his origins, loss, and the pursuit of forbidden knowledge shaped a simple boy into the most famous prophet in human history is one of the most fascinating stories ever told. If you want to learn more about the hidden sides of historical geniuses, subscribe to our channel, Personalities in Detail. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us in our search for the truth. By day, Michel attended Mass, learned the Catechism, and absorbed the dogmas of Catholicism. But his evenings were spent at the home of his maternal grandfather, Jean de Saint-Remy. This old man was a walking encyclopedia of a bygone era. He was a physician who had once treated the good King René, Count of Provence. He was an astronomer, a mathematician, and a master of ancient languages. It was he who became Michel's first teacher. In his house, surrounded by scrolls and ancient books, Michel learned things not taught in any school. His grandfather opened the secret world of knowledge to him. He taught him Hebrew so he could read the sacred texts in their original form. He told him of the Kabbalah, the mystical doctrine that sought hidden meaning in the numbers and letters of Scripture. But the most important lesson was the observation of the heavens. For hours they would sit on the flat roof of the house, watching the movements of the stars and planets. His grandfather taught him celestial mathematics, astrology. At that time, it was not considered charlatanry. It was a science, the sister of astronomy. "The stars are God's clocks," the old man used to say. "They do not compel men to act, but they show the right time for it." Michel absorbed this knowledge with the veracity of a genius. At the age of 10, he could already calculate the positions of the planets. He astonished adults with his memory, reciting entire chapters from the Bible and the works of ancient philosophers by heart. He was nicknamed the Little Stargazer. But his grandfather taught him not only to look at the sky, but also to look at the ground. He took his grandson on walks in the mountains, showed him medicinal herbs, and taught him how to distinguish, gather, dry, and prepare ointments and elixirs from them. The stars speak of destiny, he taught, but herbs can soothe the pain that destiny brings. Thus, in Michel's mind, two threads intertwined from childhood, forming the foundation of his life: mysticism and medicine, the foresight of the future and the struggle for survival in the present. At the age of 14, he left his family home. He was sent to study in Avignon, the city that until recently had been the residence of the popes. There at the university, he studied the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, logic, and the quadrivium, geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. He was a brilliant student. His memory was phenomenal. He could recall a lecture after hearing it just once. His fellow students nicknamed him ___, quote, _6, because he constantly defended the Copernican theory that the Earth revolves around the Sun, an idea the Church still viewed with suspicion. It seemed a brilliant career as an academic scholar awaited him, but history decided otherwise. In the year 1520, when Michel was 17 years old, a calamity worse than any war befell Europe: the plague, the Black Death. The epidemic flared up with new force in the south of France. The university in Avignon was closed. Students and professors scattered to the winds. Michel found himself alone on the street in a world gripped by panic and death. And here, he made a decision that defined his character. Instead of fleeing and hiding, as many did, he decided to use the knowledge he had received from his grandfather. He decided to become a doctor. Not a study-bound doctor in silk robes, but a field physician, an apothecary who goes where everyone else flees. For 8 years, from 1521 to 1529, Michel de Nostredame spent his life wandering. These were his universities of the road. He traversed the entire south of France, from Provence to Languedoc, moving from town to town, from village to village. He saw death in all its forms. He entered houses marked with crosses, where entire families died in agony. He saw the pyres on which bodies were burned, and heard the ringing of bells that announced the approach of the death cart. The official medicine of the time was powerless. Doctors treated the plague with bloodletting, mercury, and cauterizing the buboes with a hot iron, methods that often killed the patient faster than the disease. They paraded in their famous beak-like masks, stuffed with fragrant herbs, looking like ominous birds, and charging exorbitant sums for useless advice. Michel despised them. He sought his own path. He remembered his grandfather's lessons. He studied folk medicine, collected recipes from village healers, and experimented. He realized that bloodletting only weakened the sick further. He refused to use it. Instead, he focused on hygiene and strengthening the body. He advised people to ventilate rooms, burn the clothes and bedding of the deceased, wash their hands and bodies with vinegar, and drink clean, boiled water, often from mountain springs. These simple measures, which seem obvious to us today, were revolutionary in the 16th century. But his most important weapon became an invention that brought him his first fame. He created the rose pills. These were lozenges made from the petals of red roses, picked at dawn and mixed with sawdust from green cypress, iris, cloves, and aloe. The secret to their effectiveness, as we now know, was the enormous dose of vitamin C contained in rose hips and roses. This remedy strengthened the immune system and helped the body fight the infection. Michel distributed these pills for free or for a symbolic fee. He advised people to keep them in their mouths so that their vapors would protect against the miasmas. His methods worked. Wherever the young apothecary de Nostredame appeared, the mortality rate dropped. People began to call him a miracle worker. His reputation preceded him. In the year 1529, he finally decided to complete his education and obtain official status. He arrived in Montpellier, home to the oldest and most respected medical faculty in France. His matriculation was a scandal. When the professors learned that he had worked as an apothecary for 8 years, they tried to reject him. The craft of an apothecary was considered a mechanical art, a manual labor unworthy of the noble title of a doctor. But Michel did not give up. He demanded an examination, and he passed it with flying colors. His knowledge of herbs and diseases was so profound that the professors were forced to admit his superiority. In just 1 year, he completed a course that took others 3 years. In the year 1530, he received the title of Doctor of Medicine and the right to wear the scarlet mantle and the square cap. He Latinized his surname. He was now Michel Nostradamus. The famous humanist and scholar Julius Caesar Scaliger invited him to Avignon. They became friends. Nostradamus opened a practice in Avignon. He was wealthy, respected, and famous. He married a beautiful girl. Her exact name is unknown, but it may have been Henriette d'Encausse. He had 2 children, a son and a daughter. It seemed he had achieved everything he had ever dreamed of. He had conquered fate. He had created his own paradise on earth. But fate, which he so desperately wanted to decipher, had a terrible lesson in store for him. A lesson that even the greatest doctor is powerless against the will of destiny. In the year 1537, the plague came to Avignon, and it struck him in the heart. Nostradamus, who had saved thousands of other lives, could not save his own family. His wife and 2 young children fell ill. He tried everything, his famous pills, ointments, elixirs. He never left their bedside, but it was all in vain. They died in his arms, one by one. It was a catastrophe not only personal but also professional. The people of Avignon, who had idolized him yesterday, now looked at him with hatred. "Physician, heal thyself," they whispered. If he couldn't save his own family, then he is a charlatan, and his miracle methods are a lie. His patients turned away from him. His wife's relatives demanded the return of her dowry, accusing him of negligence. Even his friend Scaliger turned his back on him, perhaps out of envy or fear for his own reputation. But the worst was the attention of the Inquisition. Rumors of his bold statements had reached them. It was said that once, passing a statue of the Virgin Mary that a local craftsman was carving, he had sarcastically remarked, quote, 10. It had been a joke about the sculptor's skill, but it was interpreted as blasphemy. He was summoned for interrogation in Toulouse. He faced the stake. Shattered by grief, disgraced, and persecuted, Nostradamus fled Avignon under the cover of night. He became a wanderer again, but now he was fleeing not to people, but from them. For 6 years he wandered the roads of Europe, trying to find an answer to the question, why? Why had God given him the gift of healing only to take away what he held most dear? These years became his dark night of the soul. And it was in this darkness, in solitude and sorrow, that another, even more mysterious gift began to awaken within him. The gift of seeing through time. The 6 years from 1538 to 1544 are a blank spot in the map of Michel Nostradamus's life, filled with legends, speculation, and mysticism. He disappeared. The famous doctor from Montpellier transformed into a nameless pilgrim in a gray cloak, wandering the roads of Europe, staying in monasteries, taverns, or simply under the open sky. He was fleeing the Inquisition in Toulouse, but even more, he was fleeing his memories. The ghosts of his dead wife and children haunted him. He sought oblivion, but found something else. He found knowledge that was forbidden and dangerous. His route can only be roughly reconstructed. He was in Venice, the city of canals and masks, where East met West. There, in the shops of Jewish booksellers and the libraries of Armenian monks, he studied ancient manuscripts. He read the works of the Neoplatonists, Hermetic treatises, and books on alchemy and magic. He delved even deeper into the study of astrology than in his childhood. Now he sought not just clues to illnesses in the stars, but answers to global questions about the fate of kingdoms, about wars, about the end of times. He visited Sicily, where he studied the properties of volcanoes and healing sulfur springs. He was in Milan and Genoa. The legends from this period portray him no longer as a physician, but as a seer. The most famous story took place in Italy, in Ancona. Nostradamus was walking along a road and came across a group of young Franciscan monks. Suddenly he stopped, approached one of them, a former swineherd named Felice Peretti, fell to his knees before him and kissed the hem of his coarse robe. The monks were shocked. They asked. Nostradamus looked up and answered calmly. Everyone laughed at the crazy Frenchman. Felice Peretti was a nobody, a poor monk. But 40 years later, in the year 1585, he became Pope Sixtus V. The prophecy had come true. Another legend tells of his stay at the castle of Fin-sur-Loire. The lord of the castle, Lord de Florenville, decided to have some fun with the prophet. He pointed to two piglets in the courtyard, one black and one white, and asked, quote, 14, quote. Nostradamus replied without hesitation, quote, 15, quote. The Lord, wanting to embarrass his guest, secretly ordered the cook to roast the white piglet for dinner. In the evening, when the roast was served, the Lord asked with a triumphant smile, quote, 16, quote, 17. Nostradamus replied. The Lord summoned the cook. Trembling with fear, the cook confessed he had slaughtered the white piglet. But while he was briefly distracted, a tame wolf cub kept at the castle had slipped into the kitchen and stolen the carcass. The black one had to be slaughtered in great haste. The Lord turned pale. The laughter died. These years changed him. He returned from his travels not broken, but reborn. He had found an inner strength, the tranquility of a man who had gazed over the edge of the world. In the year 1544, he returned to France, first to Marseille, where he once again battled a plague epidemic, and then to Aix-en-Provence. Here, he performed his second medical miracle. The city was dying out. The city council invited him as their last hope. Nostradamus applied his old methods, hygiene and the rose-colored pills, but supplemented them with new knowledge acquired in Italy. The epidemic receded. The city council rewarded him with a lifetime pension. He was a hero once more. In 1547, tired of constant wandering, he decided to settle down. He chose the small town of Salon-de-Provence, located between Marseille and Avignon. It was a quiet, sleepy place, perfect for a man seeking peace. He bought a small house on a street leading to the Château de l'Empéry, and here, at the age of 44, he began his second life. He married for a second time. His chosen bride was the wealthy widow Anne Ponsard. She bore him 6 children, 3 sons and 3 daughters. Nostradamus transformed into a respectable bourgeois. He opened a shop, But he did not only sell medicines. He became a perfumer and cosmetician. He created perfumes, face creams to make women as beautiful as Helen of Troy, ointments, and hair dyes. He even wrote a book, The Treatise on Makeup and Jams, in which he revealed not only cosmetic recipes, but also recipes for exquisite desserts, quince jelly, candied pears, and marzipan. It seemed as though the great physician and seer had decided to end his days as a confectioner, but this was merely a facade. By day he cooked jam and treated his neighbors' colds, but at night, when the town slept, he would climb the spiral staircase to his secret study, which he had set up at the very top of his house, under the roof. There, among astrolabes, globes, magical crystals, and ancient books, his real work began. The work for which he endured the hell of loss and years of wandering. He began a conversation with eternity. Nostradamus' study was his fortress and his temple. Not even his wife, Anne, dared to enter the room without permission. The furnishings were ascetic but mysterious. In the center stood a tripod, an exact replica of the Delphic tripod upon which the Pythia was set. On the table lay astronomical tables and ephemerides, which showed the positions of the planets for hundreds of years in advance. But his most important instrument was a simple copper bowl filled with water. In his letters, particularly in the dedication to his son Caesar, Nostradamus lifted the veil on his methods, albeit in a vague and circumlocutory manner. He used the ancient technique of hydromancy, divination by water, combined with astrological calculations. At night, he would light candles. He would sit on the tripod, holding a laurel branch in his hand, the symbol of Apollo, the god of prophecy. He sprinkled the hem of his robe and his feet with water, and he would gaze into it. He stared at the dark, still surface of the water in the bowl until his consciousness began to alter. He fell into a trance. The mind free from care in the silence of the night, he wrote in his very first quatrain. Sitting on the copper tripod, a faint flame emerges from the void, making one utter things that are not believed in vain. In this state of trance, bordering on madness, images began to flash before his inner eye. This was not a motion picture with a clear plot. They were flashes, fragments of images, sounds, and smells. He saw burning cities, heard the clash of weapons, the cries of the dying, and saw the faces of kings yet unborn. He saw strange machines flying in the sky, iron fish under the water, and mushroom-shaped clouds of fire. These visions were chaotic, terrifying, and without chronology. When he awoke from the trance, exhausted and drenched in sweat, he would write down what he had seen with a trembling hand. He wrote poems, quatrains, 4-line stanzas. Why poems? Because poetry allows one to conceal meaning and make it ambiguous. He was afraid. He was terrified. He knew that if he were to write directly, in the year 1789, the king will be overthrown and priests will be hanged. He would be burned at the stake as a heretic, a troublemaker. That is why he encrypted everything. He used the green language, the language of birds, alchemists, and mystics. He mixed Old French with Latin, Greek, the Provençal dialect, and Hebrew. He used anagrams, letter substitutions, metaphors, and mythological imagery. He deliberately broke the chronology, mixing predictions about the distant future with events of the near future. He divided his poems into centuries, chapters each containing 100 quatrains. "I have obscured my prophecies," he wrote, "so as not to frighten the people and not to anger the powers that be. The truth must be hidden under a veil, and only time, the great revealer, will show its face." In 1555, he made his decision. He sent the manuscript to the publisher Masse Bonhomme in Lyon. The book was titled The True Prophecies of Master Michel Nostradamus. The first edition contained only the first 3 centuries and part of the 4th. The book's appearance was like a bombshell, but the effect was mixed. The common people, who did not understand the complex metaphors, saw the book as merely a collection of frightening tales about the end of the world. Intellectuals, humanists, and poets like Pierre de Ronsard were delighted by the enigmatic style and the author's erudition. But the church and the conservative segment of society were furious. He was accused of black magic, of a pact with the devil. "How does he know this?" they asked. "Only from Satan, for the future is known to God alone." In Salon, a mob of fanatics gathered outside his house and burned an effigy of him, shouting, "Cursed one!" He was once again threatened with the stake, but the book fell into the hands of the one person who could save him, the most powerful woman in Europe, the Queen of France, Catherine de Medici. She was herself obsessed with mysticism and believed in astrology and omens. She read the centuries, and as she navigated the thicket of metaphors, she came across the 35th quatrain of the 1st century. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 31, underscore, underscore. Catherine froze. Her husband, King Henry II, often used the lion as his emblem. He loved jousting tournaments and single duels. He wore a gilded helmet with a visor. The underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 32, underscore, underscore. The Queen felt the cold horror of recognition. She understood this was a warning, and she wanted to see the man who had dared to write such a thing. In 1556, Nostradamus received a royal invitation. He was to appear in Paris. This was his finest hour. The provincial apothecary and alleged sorcerer set off for the court to become the prophet of kings. The journey to Paris in July of 1556 was both a triumph and an ordeal. He traveled not as a simple petitioner, but as a man invited by the Queen herself. But the journey was arduous. He was already 53 years old. Gout tormented him. In Paris, he was not housed in a palace, but in a modest inn. Yet the very next day, a carriage was sent for him. The meeting with Catherine de Medici became legendary. The Queen received him in her private chambers at the Louvre. She was intelligent, shrewd, and superstitious. She questioned him for hours about the meaning of the quatrain concerning the young and old lions. Nostradamus, aware that his life hung by a thread, predicting the king's death was high treason, answered evasively. He said the lion was a symbol of strength, and the golden cage could mean either captivity or spiritual enlightenment. He did not directly confirm the king would die, but he hinted that the danger was great. Catherine, impressed by his diplomacy and wisdom, asked him to create horoscopes for her children. the 7 princes and princesses of the House of Valois. Nostradamus spent several weeks on this task. His judgment was both terrifying and majestic. He told the queen, quote, 33. To any mother, this would have sounded like a blessing, but Catherine, with her keen political sense, understood the hidden meaning. If 3 sons were to become king in succession, it meant the 2 eldest would die young and childless, and that meant the Valois dynasty was doomed to extinction. This was a prophecy about the end of the House of Valois. King Henry II regarded the charlatan from Provence with skepticism. He received him coolly, gave him a small sum of money, and dismissed him. Nostradamus returned to Salon, but he was now under the Queen's unofficial protection. The Inquisition no longer dared to touch him. 3 years passed in anxious anticipation. It was July of 1559. A double wedding was being celebrated in Paris. The king's daughters were getting married. To mark the occasion, a grand jousting tournament was held. King Henry, who loved tournaments above all else, decided to participate personally. He wore his beloved gilded armor. He chose as his opponent the young Count Gabriel de Montgomery, captain of the Scottish Guard. On Montgomery's shield was a depiction of a lion. Catherine, remembering the prophecy, begged her husband not to ride into the arena. She spoke of bad dreams, of premonitions, but Henry merely laughed. He wanted to show off before his young mistress, Diane de Poitiers. They charged at each other. The lances struck the shields and shattered into 1,000 pieces. But Henry, heated by the combat, demanded a rematch. Montgomery tried to refuse, citing it as a bad omen, but the king insisted. They spurred their horses toward each other once more. The impact. Montgomery's lance broke against the king's cuirass, but a sharp splitter from the shaft slid upward. It penetrated the eye slit of the gilded helmet. The golden cage. The splinter pierced the king's eye and entered his brain. Henry was carried from the field. He was still alive. For 10 days he died in terrible agony. The best doctors, including the famous Vesalius, tried to save him, but to no avail. 2 wounds in one, as Nostradamus had written. The eye and the brain proved fatal. On the 10th of July, the king died. This event shook Europe. The correspondence with the text of the 35th quatrain was so precise, so terrifying, that even the harshest skeptics fell silent. Nostradamus was instantly transformed from a fashionable author into a living legend, a man whose voice was the voice of fate itself. After the death of Henry II, Nostradamus's influence at court became boundless. Catherine de Medici, now regent, trusted him unconditionally. She made him her personal physician and advisor on ordinary matters. Although he lived in Salon, the Queen's messengers rode to him continuously with letters. She consulted him on everything: the health of her sons, political alliances, the weather, and conspiracies. But this fame also had a downside. At court, he was hated. The court astrologers and physicians envied his influence. Poets composed scathing epigrams about him. "Nostradamus, you lie when you foretell us woe. Your verses are but the ramblings of a mad old man." He was accused of spying for Spain and of black magic. It was claimed he was a secret Jew who sought to destroy the Christian monarchy. In Paris, a mob, stirred up by the rumor that he had predicted the city's destruction by fire, burned an effigy of him. He had to leave the capital secretly and return to Provence, but things were no better at home. In Salon, he was feared. Neighbors would cross the street when he left his house. They considered him a sorcerer who communed with demons. It was said that strange lights rose from his tower at night, and that inhuman voices could be heard. Nostradamus withdrew more and more into himself. He suffered from illnesses, gout, dropsy, and arthritis. His body swelled, causing him agony, but his spirit remained indomitable. He continued to work. He completed his centuries up to the 10th, totaling approximately 942 quatrains. He wrote almanacs in which he gave practical advice to farmers and predicted the weather. He maintained an extensive correspondence with scholars and monarchs throughout Europe. He sensed his time was running out and hurried to leave his message. In 1564, 2 years before his death, his last and most distinguished guest paid him a visit. The young King Charles IX, Catherine's son, was on a tour of the country and decided to pay a personal visit to the magician. The royal procession rode into the small town of Salon. It was a day of triumph for Nostradamus before his countrymen who had despised him. The king visited his house, spoke with him at length, bestowed upon him the title of royal counselor, and gifted him the enormous sum of 200 écus. During this visit, an episode occurred that would become another legend. In the king's retinue was a young boy, Henry of Navarre, a distant relative of the Valois and a Huguenot. Nostradamus asked to see the child. After examining him, or, according to another version, reading his palm or casting horoscope, the old man said, quote, 35, Catherine turned pale. She disliked Henry, but the prophecy came true 25 years later when Henry of Navarre became Henry IV, the founder of the Bourbon dynasty. By the summer of 1566, Michel Nostradamus, the great seer whom kings feared, had become a wreck of a man. He was only 62 years old, but looked like an ancient elder. His once strong body was ravaged by disease. The gout that had tormented him for years had developed into severe dropsy. Fluid was accumulating in his tissues. His legs and abdomen were swollen. Every movement caused him unbearable pain. He could barely lie down. Choking fits constricted his throat as soon as his head touched the pillow. He slept sitting in a special chair, spending sleepless nights fighting for every breath. But his mind remained crystal clear, cool, and perceptive. He knew the end was near. He knew it not only as an experienced physician who saw the irreversible symptoms, but also as an astrologer who had read his own death sentence in the movements of the stars. Earlier that year, while compiling his annual almanac, he had made a note next to the date of July 2nd. It was a short, chilling sentence in Latin. Quote, 36, Here, death is near. He calmly marked the day of his departure, as one would note the day of a planned journey. On the evening of July 1st, he sensed the time had come. He summoned the notary, Maître Joseph Roche. This was not a mystical ritual, but a business meeting. Nostradamus, the son of a notary and grandson of merchants, wanted to depart from life having put all his earthly affairs in perfect order. He dictated a detailed will. His fortune was estimated at 3,440 gold crowns, a colossal sum for that era. Meticulously, down to the last coin, he specified who would receive what. He provided for his wife, Anne, ensuring her a comfortable old age, but on the condition that she not remarry. He left his daughters a dowry and his sons capital. He wanted his family, whom he loved with an earthly, human love, to not suffer any hardship after his passing. When the notary had left, only the prophet's loyal student and secretary, Jean-Aimé de Chavigny, remained in the room. He helped his master settle in for the night. Nostradamus was weak. His breathing was ragged and intermittent. As Chavigny bid him farewell, he said as usual, "Until tomorrow, master." Nostradamus fixed a heavy gaze on him and spoke in a quiet but firm voice that brooked no argument. His final, legendary sentence: "At dawn tomorrow, you will not see me alive." It was not a lament, but a statement of fact. He extinguished the candle and was left alone in the darkness, alone with the death he had awaited and foretold. On the morning of July 2nd, the servants and the secretary entered the room. It was deathly silent. Nostradamus was not in bed. They found him on the floor between the bed and a heavy wooden bench. He was lying face down, his arms outstretched, as if he had tried to stand up or to embrace the earth. He was dead. The prophecy had been fulfilled to the very hour. The great prophet had departed without breaking his word. His funeral became a major event in Provence. Despite the rumors of witchcraft, he was bid farewell as a great man. He was buried in the wall of the Franciscan church in Salon, in the chapel of the Virgin Mary. Yet, even in the matter of his own burial, Nostradamus remained true to himself, turning it into a riddle. According to a persistent legend, he left a strange instruction: that he be buried standing, sealed upright within the wall. Why? The locals whispered that he had said, "I do not want cowardly fools treading on my bones when I am dead." Even from the grave, he wanted to look the world straight in the face without bowing his head. On the marble slab, his widow had an epitaph carved, full of pride and sorrow. "Here lie the bones of the celebrated Michel Nostradamus, the only one of all mortals worthy of recording, with his almost divine pen, under the influence of the stars, the future events of the entire world." For 200 years, his tomb was a place of pilgrimage. People came, pressed their ears to the slab, and hoped to hear the whisper of prophecies. Rumors circulated that he was not dead but sleeping, that the coffin held a doll, not a body, or that the secret book, the Key of Solomon, which granted power over the world, was buried with him. But in the year 1791, at the height of the French Revolution, the magician's peace was disturbed. The revolution, having declared war on prejudice, kings, and the church, also reached Salon. A unit of Marseille National Guardsmen, on their way to Paris, stopped in the town. The soldiers, drunk on wine and a sense of impunity, heard the legend that the seer's coffin contained treasures from kings. With torches and crowbars, they stormed the church. Amid the cheers of the crowd, they smashed the marble slab of the sarcophagus. Legend has it that the soldiers recoiled in horror when the lid fell. The skeleton of Nostradamus was in its place, and on its chest lay a golden medallion or tablet on which a year was engraved, 1791. He had predicted the year his final rest would be disturbed. But the fear lasted only a moment. Greed and drunkenness took over. One of the soldiers, the most brazen of them all, snatched the prophet's skull. Quote, 43, he shouted. Quote, 44. He poured wine into the skull, and as the red liquid spilled like blood, drank it in one gulp, toasting the death of tyrants and superstition. Retribution was immediate and cinematic. The next morning, as the unit was leaving the city, that soldier fell behind. A drunken brawl broke out, or according to another version, a random shootout occurred. A stray bullet struck him directly in the head. He was killed instantly. The residents of Salon who witnessed this were horrified. The curse of Nostradamus. Quote 45 had come true before their very eyes. The prophet's bones, scattered across the church floor, were saved by the town's mayor. He secretly collected them and later had them reinterred in another church, the Collegiate Church of Saint Laurent, where they rest to this day. But it is said that his spirit never found peace. And on the anniversary of the tomb's opening, strange sounds can be heard in the church. So who was he, really? This question has troubled humanity for 5 centuries. Was he a charlatan who wrote vague verses to beguile kings, or could he truly see through time? Skeptics and scholars say he was a brilliant mystifier. His centuries are a labyrinth of thousands of words written in a mix of 4 languages, full of anagrams and metaphors. They contain no dates, no names. It is a chameleon text. It can be retroactively applied to any event. A great monarch, a new sect, fire from the sky, a battle by the river. Such events happen in every century. People simply find in his verses what they want to find, fitting reality to the prophecy. Believers, however, point to the eerie coincidences that cannot be explained by mere chance. He predicted the death of Henry II with details, golden cage, eye pierced, that could not have been simply invented. Though he lived in the 16th century, he wrote of travel in the air, of submarines, of a fire that melts stone, the atomic bomb. He wrote of a man named Hister who would drench Europe in blood. Historians say Hister is the ancient name for the Danube River. But Hitler was born on the banks of the Danube, and the phonetic similarity is startling. Perhaps the truth lies on another level. Nostradamus was neither a charlatan nor a video recorder capturing the future. He was a diagnostician. Just as a great doctor can predict a patient's illness and death from the color of their skin and the gleam in their eyes, he looked upon the Europe of his time and made a diagnosis for humanity. He understood that history is cyclical, that greed breeds war, fanaticism, and terror, and that the folly of kings leads to the fall of empires. His book is not a roadmap to the future. It is a mirror of fear. Nostradamus created the universal code of human nightmares. Every century looks into this mirror and sees its own monsters. The people of the 16th century saw Turks and the plague. The people of the 20th century saw tanks and mushroom clouds. The people of the 21st century see terrorists, global warming, and stock market crashes. We do not read him to learn the date of Armageddon. We read him because we are afraid. And we want to believe that at least someone has a plan in all this chaos. He was a doctor who could not save his own family from the plague, and perhaps, in becoming a prophet, he was trying to do for humanity what he could not do for his children: to warn, to offer a chance at salvation. He left us not with answers, but with questions, and as long as humanity fears tomorrow, the shadow of the doctor in the plague mask, sitting over a bowl of water, will stand behind our shoulder.